As a big lover of John Lennon, I suppose, try and keep this simple. What do you think he'd be doing today? Would he be politically active?
Well, I think he might be here at Glastonbury, for one thing. But I think, I think after this period, basically, him and Yoko arrived in New York feeling like they could change the world, and they got very, very political, and that's really the kind of time frame that we're dealing with here. But through the course of this film, they kind of came to realize that maybe they couldn't change the world, and actually pivoted to more kind of human-to-human things, that's why they ended up doing the concert for the kids of Willowbrook. So I suspect he would have retreated a bit, as he sort of tended to do in the latter part of his life after this film. So probably would have retreated from politics, but thrown in the occasional bomb every now and again.
Anyone else? Can I ask a question then? Okay, let's step into the night. How much of it, to what extent were you beholden to the estate of Lennon and Ono in clearing content, and did they have approval over the film at the end?
Well, I mean, they were, Kevin MacDonald, the director, basically, he's not someone who would have wanted to have made a puff piece, essentially, and like myself, I wouldn't have kind of wanted to be involved in that. So, and they really respected the kind of stature he's got, and so they were really helpful and really hands off. So they didn't come and the first time Sean Lennon saw it was really near the end of the edit, and it was kind of an amazing screening, because we'd been making the film for almost a year, and then suddenly to be sitting next to Sean and the sudden realization that this is his life and childhood that we're looking at right now, and that was quite a strangely emotional screening. But they didn't stick their oar in, which was great.
It's just that at some places it looks like you've because what's really good about it is there isn't a commentary apart from those black and white typed out cards that come up. There's no, so you leave a lot of to the imagination and interpretation of the audience. So there seems to be a suggestion that his activism was effectively curtailed by the fact that he wanted to have a family life and stay in New York. But it's not kind of made explicit. It's just there in the way that you've pieced the material together.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe, as life is, it's more complicated than that, and that, his activism was curtailed by the government. He wanted to stay in America and he was scared about the visa. He also kind of fell out with Jerry Rubin, and that they were maybe, Jerry Rubin and that kind of group were not averse to violence. And he suspected that maybe they were trying to create violence, as they did in Chicago like 4 years before, and so he kind of turned his back on that. But yeah, so I think there are a number of reasons that he kind of pulled away from activism.
Had you worked with Kevin before, or did he bring you in having seen, because you made that New York documentary, Meet Me in the Bathroom, about the early noughties New York indie scene, and that's a really great edit in there. It has its own sort of propulsive energy that moves along. It doesn't need talking heads and rostrum camera shots did Kevin see that and bring you in on this?
I mean, I've actually worked with Kevin on quite a lot of projects, but that was quite helpful as well, to have made that, to have that was not to kind of go off into another film, but that was made in lockdown and we couldn't do any interviews, so that kind of forced us into making a film without interviews, essentially. And so when we, basically when we started making this, Kevin was really clear that he didn't want to make something that was, that there's a lot of stuff about John Lennon and the Beatles out there. We wanted to do something fresh and new, and so we decided to only make it with stuff that existed from the time, and so having that experience of making that film before in the same way was helpful.
It looks like a really good stylish decision, but you're saying that you learned that as a result of having no resources under lockdown. Yeah, but you shouldn't have said that. You should have said it was your brilliant new invention of how to. But it is really great, because the temptation with those films is to have a succession of people over-explaining them. And at what point did you realise? Because Lennon kept all of his phone conversations archived, didn't he? Because he was worried about being investigated by the CIA and then misrepresented. At what point did you know that all those phone conversations were there and would be a really useful way of telling the story?
I mean, we were quite a way through the edit, and someone from the estate called up and said, we found something that you might be interested in, and we could tell from the sort of way he said it that it was something really interesting, and he had kind of been in New York at their lockup, essentially, their archive, and the way I imagine it, he was kind of walking around and found this kind of shoebox on a dusty shelf, and he found some tapes in there that had never been listened to, and when they listened to them, these were the tapes. So it was kind of an amazing find, but it wasn't until maybe halfway through the edit, but everything that they were talking about was everything the film was about. So it was a massive moment for us.
In the fade of the film, which I think we came out a bit early, but in the credit fade, there is the birth of Sean Lennon, which sort of suggests that this rootless period in Lennon and Ono's life had kind of come to an end, and that they'd worked out how to be a family. But in between 73, when your film ends, and 75, when there's the footage of Sean Lennon as a baby, there's that terrible 2-year period where Lennon goes completely off the rails, is serially unfaithful to Ono, and beats loads of people up in Los Angeles. Was that just not something that would work for the arc of the story, or was there an anxiety about how that would play with the estate? Was it just a stretch too far for the shape of that story, or because it kind of suggests a conclusion that it's not quite as simple as that, is it?
Yeah, firstly, that wasn't done for the estate, and it wasn't because we were trying to avoid something. The period of our film was very much basically 18 months from when they arrived. Basically, they arrived in New York and they moved into this very small, one-room apartment, and that opened onto the street. And this was a very kind of, important moment in their life and pivotal moment, and where they were very energized as activists. So, that was really our time frame, and we couldn't go off into what's known as the Lost Weekend, these 2 years where he went to LA and kind of went crazy. And so it just didn't work within the film. But, at the end where we're jumping forward to 1975 and so forth, then this is the time when Sean was born. So, we're definitely not trying to gloss over that moment, but it just didn't fit in this film.
There's only one bit that's in. It's almost like a dogma film, in as much as all the music that's in it is sourced from live footage or in the background of what's actually happening. All the archive is genuine. There's just that one thing, which is that shot that pans around the apartment. And the point you're trying to make, obviously, is that the apartment was so different to Lennon and Ono having lived in a big mansion in Ascot. They shrunk it down to this little space. That little space became their world. All their political activism was informed by the telly that they watched sitting on the bed. And what you've done is recreated that apartment and then panned a camera around it. That's quite an interesting, because it kind of breaks the form of the film in a way, doesn't it? Choosing that to reconstruct the apartment and create that footage.
Yeah, we were I think we were really trying to be strict, as you say, almost like a kind of dogma film, just because we wanted to present the world that they saw and be really true to that, and actually just spend time with them in a way without trying to force a narrative. So people had a sort of could come away with the experience of actually having spent time with them. But we did feel that apartment was the kind of geographical, spiritual core of the film, and so we wanted to be able to sort of drift around it in almost like a meditative way, to give people a bit of time just to take it in, and before we went off into all the archives. So we did recreate that and shoot that, and as you say, the only bit, and it was kind of amazing, watching it all happen, because it was so detailed. A lot of their original items were in there. It was done to the exact specifications in terms of area and size, and if we couldn't find their items, then we would buy exact replicas, and then if we couldn't do that, like the bedspread was made, we sent photos to someone who was sort of an expert in recreating bedspreads, and so it was kind of an amazing thing to go on set and walk through that, and we hope that kind of attention to detail comes across.
And was there a script or a story arc that you were working to as a pair, as the two of you, or did you kind of discover that in the edit? For example, the fall and rise of Nixon becomes a sort of secondary story to it, as if he's a kind of nemesis of Lennon and what the early 70s radicals stood for. Was that something that was always there, or did it kind of emerge in the edit that would work?
I mean, it emerged in the edit. I mean, Kevin is someone who never goes in with a very strong... I mean, he has a lot of ideas, but he never kind of a very prescriptive idea. He's always about kind of follow your feelings and you know, you'll find the film, and that's why I love working with him. It's always kind of terrifying because you're sometimes 2/3 of the way, almost at the end of the project, and you still don't really know where you're going. But it always seems to kind of get there at the end. But yeah, that was just, you know, once we started looking at stuff, we realised that there was this time frame of where they lived in this flat, and then Nixon started coming in as a character as the film was made.
There's been so much, you know, documentary material about the Beatles, and there was a kind of definitive series that they oversaw for TV. What was the sort of pitch that meant that you could get funding for this and get it made? How did you say this is going to be different to those other films?
Well, I think it all started with the fact that they knew, well, basically the concert was the only concert that John gave after leaving the Beatles, so it had a sort of inherent value, and it had been kind of sitting in a lockup somewhere, in an archive somewhere, and Peter Worsley, the producer, knew about it and kind of basically, I guess, bought the rights to it and then connected with Kevin. So that was, you know, I think the cultural value of that concert was what really kind of drove the film. And that was, you know, that was the only thing that we were kind of given at the start. Is like, we've got this concert, can you make a film out of it?
I think we've covered it all. And thanks a lot for coming along. And if you do see Sam's last film that he edited, Meet Me in the Bathroom, about the early noughties New York indie scene, is really great as well. Thanks a lot for coming along today. Please, round of applause. Thank you very much.